Today, we are diving deep into one of history's most mind-bending questions. What if the great epic poems of ancient India, like the Mahabharata, what if they aren't just myths? What if they're actually technical reports detailing a forgotten, high-tech past that could literally rewrite the entire story of humanity? Let's dig in.
Now listen to that. That's not a line from some modern sci-fi blockbuster. It's a direct quote from the Mahabharata, an ancient text written thousands of years before Hiroshima or Nagasaki. The language is so specific, so technically precise, it really forces us to ask a pretty radical question.
So, what are we looking at here? Was this just the wild imagination of ancient poets, using the biggest metaphors they could think of to describe a battle? Or could it be a frighteningly accurate report of a weapon of mass destruction, a technology that was somehow discovered, used, and then completely lost to time? The answer? Well, it could change everything we think we know about our own past. To get to the bottom of this, we're going to follow a clear path. First, we'll decode the texts themselves. Then, we're going to examine the incredible technology they describe, from the celestial fleet to the actual arsenal of the gods. We'll reconstruct the Great War itself, search for physical, real-world proof, and finally, weigh the two massive theories that could explain it all. And by the end, the verdict is going to be yours. Okay, so let's start with the source material. If these texts really are more than just stories, they should be filled with paradoxes, little details that don't make any sense as ancient mythology, but suddenly click into place when you look at them through a technological lens. And bam, we find them right away. First, check out the tactical paradox on the left. The hero Krishna shoots down an invisible flying machine of Vimana. How? The text says he used an arrow that kills by sound. Now, that isn't magic. That is a perfect, almost textbook description of an ancient equivalent to a heat-seeking missile targeting the engine's noise. Then, on the right, the scientific paradox, the supposed curse of a superweapon called the Brahmastra. It causes a 12-year drought, infertility, and makes survivors' hair and nails fall out. This is a shockingly precise clinical description of radioactive fallout, described 3,000 years before we even knew what radiation was. This framework, these 6 keys, is how we're going to organize the evidence. Think of it as our investigative toolkit. Each key unlocks a different layer of this mystery, taking us from ancient texts and diagrams through classifications of fleets and weapons, all the way to strange archaeological sites and the 2 big theories that could explain absolutely everything. So let's use our toolkit and take a look at the tech. So let's talk about the hardware. These flying machines, the Vimanas, are mentioned hundreds of times across dozens of ancient texts. We're not talking about some one-off metaphor here. They're described as a fundamental piece of technology for this civilization. But the real question is, how did they supposedly work? Now, this is where it gets really wild. One text, the Samarangana Sutradhara, actually gives a shockingly detailed description of a mercury vortex engine. As you can see, it starts with heating mercury. This creates a powerful spinning vortex, which in turn generates a strong electromagnetic field. And the result? A localized anti-gravity effect. This isn't a rocket pushing against the ground, it's a machine literally pushing itself out of the planet's gravity well. It would be silent and incredibly agile. And get this, it wasn't just one type of machine. The texts describe a whole classified air force. You've got the Rukma, a conical interceptor, the Sundra, a rocket-shaped craft, and the Tripura, a massive 3-tiered mothership. And these things were multi-environment vehicles, capable of flying in the atmosphere, in space, and even operating underwater. This sounds less like mythology and a lot more like a full-blown military aerospace complex. Of course, a fleet like that is pretty useless without weapons. So now that we've seen the delivery systems, it's time to open up the arsenal of the gods and analyze the astras, the weapons these Vimanas carried, weapons supposedly capable of turning entire armies to ash. Let's circle back to Krishna's battle with that invisible Vimana. The enemy ship was using advanced stealth tech, creating illusions and just vanishing from sight. It seemed unbeatable. But here's the thing, being invisible didn't mean it was silent. Krishna just closed his eyes, listened for the engine's hum, and fired. The most advanced cloaking tech in the world, defeated by basic physics. This isn't a story about magic, it's a story about smart, asymmetric warfare. But then we have the ultimate doomsday weapon, the Brahmastra. Just look at the effects listed here. A 12-year drought, poisoned land and food, infertility in the survivors, and the classic signs of acute radiation sickness, like hair and nails just falling out. The parallels to a nuclear weapons fallout aren't just close, they are an exact one-to-one match. The text doesn't just describe a big bang, it describes long-term, systemic, environmental contamination. So we have the carriers, the Vimanas, and we have their warheads, the Astras. We now have all the pieces we need to reconstruct the main event, the Great Battle of Kurukshetra. So, was this just an epic clash of heroes with swords and chariots? Or was it the first technological, maybe even nuclear war in human history? First, let's just talk about the scale. The Mahabharata describes nearly 4 million warriors. This number right here, all fighting in this battle over just 18 days. This was no small local skirmish between a couple of rival clans. This was a world war of antiquity, pulling in armies from all across the known world. And the battle itself? It sounds eerily modern. The texts describe everything you see here. Air-to-ground attacks, with Vimanas strafing ground troops with beams of light. Aerial dogfights between Vimanas. Even a form of electronic warfare, using invisibility and fake targets to trick the enemy. And it all leads up to the deployment of that final doomsday weapon. And we come right back to that chilling description. But you know, the most terrifying detail isn't the blast itself. It's what came after. The text meticulously records that for the soldiers who survived on the edge of the blast, their hair and nails began to fall out, and all the food in the area became poisoned. That's not poetry. That sounds like a clinical field report on the after effects of radiation. But look, a story, no matter how detailed or convincing, is still just a story. To take this from interesting speculation to a plausible theory, we need physical proof. So now we're going to shift our investigation from ancient Sanskrit to modern archaeology. We're going to the ruins of the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro to look for the physical scar left behind by that fire brighter than 10,000 suns. So here's the crucial question, right? If an event like this actually happened, would it have left a scar on the earth, a signature that we could find thousands of years later? Well, let's head to the Indus Valley and find out. At the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists found something deeply strange. Dozens of skeletons were discovered just lying in the streets, some even holding hands, with zero signs of injury from any conventional weapons. It suggests a sudden, instantaneous death. But the biggest clue was this. Entire layers of brick and clay were fused into glass, a process called vitrification. And to top it all off, some reports claim that several of these skeletons were found to be highly radioactive. Let's look at the hard data that proponents of this theory point to. To vitrify brick, to turn it into glass like we see here, you need temperatures over 1500 degrees Celsius. That's way hotter than a normal city fire, but it's perfectly consistent with an airburst nuclear explosion. And the radiation levels measured on some of those skeletons, they were reportedly up to 50 times the normal background level. You take these three things together, instant death, vitrification, and radiation, they all point to a single terrifying explanation. This evidence really leads us to two mind-bending theories. First, on the left, you have the paleo-contact theory. The gods weren't gods at all, they were extraterrestrials, and Earth was just a convenient battlefield for their interstellar war. The second, on the right, is the lost civilization theory. The gods were actually us, a highly advanced human civilization, maybe like an Atlantis, that developed this incredible technology, and then used it to destroy itself, throwing the survivors back into the Stone Age. All right, we've looked at the texts, the technology, the war, and the physical evidence. We've laid out the two grand theories that could possibly explain it all. So now, let's assemble these final clues to see the complete picture before you make your decision. This right here is the heart of the entire argument. The ancient texts and the ruins are like two halves of a broken key. Separately, they're just mysteries. The stories of a war in the sky seem like total fantasy without any physical proof. And the radioactive melted ruins are an unsolvable puzzle without a story to explain them. But when you put them together, they align perfectly. The texts describe the cause, the ruins show the effect. And so, we end right where we began, with a choice. Based on everything you've seen, the paradoxes in the texts, the engine designs, the weapon effects, and the archaeological proof, what do you think? Were the gods our own highly advanced ancestors, a lost human civilization? Or were they visitors from the stars, aliens using our planet as their cosmic battlefield? The evidence is all there. Cast your vote in the comments below. Civilization or aliens? Let's see if we can figure out who really wrote our history.